Welcome to today's class. Today's class is about contrast, and I'm going to do a few lessons on this because we're going to have a look at this in detail. Now, I want to start by saying thank you to a guy who I know as Warsaw Will. So he's a guy called Will, a Scottish guy living, or who was living, in Warsaw. If anybody knows him, if anybody who has a Scotsman teaching them in Warsaw called Will, please tell me under the video, I'd be interested. I've never spoken to him, but he has a great website which I've been using and linking to in my last few videos. I like the way he teaches a lot of really advanced topics. So he writes about contrast, words of contrast on his website, and I had never heard this particular distinction, but it's very useful, as we'll see down here. But he identifies two types of contrast, and I've noticed that Oxford Dictionary also seem to see a difference between these two, although the difference is not so clean cut, as you'll see. There's concession and there's contrast. So this would be an example of contrast, a direct contrast between two things. I like oranges, but he likes apples. That's a contrast. You have a direct contrast between two different people and two different tastes. However, we usually use these words, although, though, and even though, not for direct contrasts, but more often for concessions. Now, they can be used for contrasts as well, which is what makes them so confusing, but they're generally used for concessions. And here's an example of concession. Although I like orange juice, comma, today I'm having apple juice. Now here we're not really contrasting oranges and apples, but we're admitting and saying something surprising at the same time. We're admitting that we like orange juice, however, today we are having apple juice. And so we're making a concession, we're making an admission of some sort, and that's it's not a direct contrast. We're only referring to myself here and not to two different people, and we're admitting that on the one hand this is true, and so perhaps it's surprising that that's happening at the moment. So this is a concession, and these are more often used for concessions. Now they're all the same, although, though, and even though. Even though is the strongest, and if we use them at the start we need a comma because they're subordinating conjunctions. However, if we use them in the middle we don't use a comma. Yeah, this is the comma rule for subordinating conjunctions. Now it's not so simple, because though can be used differently than although and even though. Though can be used as an adverb, which means the same as however, but although and even though cannot be used like this. And so here's my example. Yesterday was foggy. Today, though, it's not so foggy. So we're saying, however, today it's not so foggy. And we would break it off with two commas here because it's kind of coming in as an afterthought in the middle of a sentence. So we separate it with two commas. Or we put it on the end and separate it off with a comma. So we could say yesterday it was foggy, today it's not so foggy though. So please remember that though can be used in a different way, because we could not use although or even though here. Certainly not or here, because though is being used differently. It's not a subordinating conjunction here, it's an adverb. So that's one important point to remember. Let's now look at in spite of and despite, which are basically the same as these. They also are for making concessions and contrasts, but they're prepositions. They're not subordinating conjunctions. And that means we can say in spite of plus pronoun, in spite of him, in spite of her, in spite of this, despite him, despite her, despite this. We can use these plus a noun or a noun phrase. In spite of the weather, we had a picnic, something like that. We can use these plus gerund. In spite of liking oranges. So here, yeah, we wouldn't use it for this direct contrast. We'd use it more for concessions here. In spite of liking orange juice, today I'm having apple juice. Or today I'm having apple juice in spite of liking orange juice. So yeah, we would certainly use these two for the concessions. They don't really work here for just a plain contrast. I like oranges in spite of he likes apples. That, you can't say that. Or in spite of the fact that he likes apples. it doesn't really work. It's used for concessions, these two. So we could also use it plus a gerund and say something like this, and this would shorten the sentence. Despite liking orange juice, today I'm having apple juice. Or we could put the fact that and then the clause. So despite the fact that I like orange juice, today I'm having apple juice. That's also completely fine. That's fine. You can use that if you want to use a clause. Okay? You cannot say despite I like orange juice. That would be wrong. You need despite the fact that I like orange juice or despite liking orange juice. Okay? I hope that's clear. So please use these for concessions. And you'll see, even though although can be used for both concessions and contrast, it is still mainly used for concessions and not so much for contrast. Now we'll come on to number 3, while. First thing to remember is that while is that present or past continuous conjunction that you very often see with past continuous. So look at this. While he was cleaning the car, past continuous, the postman arrived. Now it's a subordinating conjunction like this. We'll need a comma in the middle if we start with while. While he was cleaning the car, comma, the postman arrived. Or the postman arrived while he was cleaning the car with no comma. Okay, so that's one use of while which has got nothing to do with contrast, but which is worth mentioning while we're talking about while. Secondly, we use it for contrast. While he likes oranges, I like apples. So we can use while, we can and do use while for direct contrasts or concessions. We use it for both. While he likes oranges, I like apples. Or we can reverse it and say I like apples while he likes oranges, but I keep seeing a comma whenever this is reversed, and so it's not the same as this subordinating conjunction while. If we reverse it, you still use a comma. Okay, so that's worth remembering, perhaps because it's direct contrast. We need that comma no matter which way round it is. Now, you can also see at the bottom one, we can use it for concession. While I like drinking beer, today I'm drinking ale. Today I'm having ale. So this would be a concession, certainly. Now, what's worth remembering here is that you cannot reverse this sentence. With although, we can reverse this sentence, as you can see here. You can certainly reverse it, and we do. We use it either way. But with while, you cannot say, today I'm having ale while I like drinking beer. It sounds weird. It sounds like you're using while as a time expression. So don't put it round the other way. I mean, don't use while in the middle if you're making a concession. Now you'll see now that it's exactly the same for another word which is very similar to while, but it's more formal, and it's whereas. So I've mentioned this in another video, my linking words video, but having read the website Random English, which is Warsaw Will's website, I decided I could do a better job of this, thanks to Will. And so if we look at whereas, it's a more formal version of while, and generally it works much better for contrast and not for concession. Although you can use it for concession, there is some overlap. Generally it works better for contrast. While it works well for both, although is more often used for concession, despite and in spite of us for some concessions, and whereas is for contrast. So we can certainly say, whereas he likes oranges, I like apples. Whereas he likes oranges, I like apples. Or I like apples, whereas he likes oranges. Both of those are okay. But with the concession, it's not so common to say, whereas I like drinking beer, today I'm having ale. But it is possible. It is possible. But again, what you cannot do is you cannot say, today I'm having ale, whereas I like drinking beer. It's not possible to do that. So you cannot, if you're going to make a concession, you cannot put whereas or while in the middle of the sentence. That's a rule that's very worth remembering. Okay, we'll hold this first part of the contrast lesson right here, but I'm going to do a lot more, so please watch lesson 2, and please ask me any questions about these contrasting linking words under the video, because I understand that some of it is very confusing and yeah, very difficult. Please like the video if you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you all soon.